So today's gospel deals with the brothers, St. James and St. John, who were nicknamed the sons of thunder in Mark's Gospel 3:17. This is the only place in the Gospels where they were given that nickname, but apparently these two brothers had a reputation of being very overbearing and hotheads. Why they were chosen by Jesus in the first place is a minor mystery, but perhaps no more than Jesus choosing a blundering Peter, an unsure Thomas, and a turncoat tax collector named Matthew. Jesus chose some unlikely candidates for friends. Anyway, we know that diplomacy was not their strong suit, but they were part of Jesus' inner circle. They, along with St. Peter, were the ones who witnessed the transfiguration of Jesus. So, it is understandable that James and John, in front of the other 10 disciples, asks Jesus to sit at his right and left when he finally comes into power. Now that's chutzpah, the only term I could use in church. Jesus listens to them and then very carefully explains that in his kingdom, it is not about sitting at his right or his left side. It's about standing. Jesus further went on to explain that each of them would stand by him and stand for him, standing for all that Jesus is about. You may ask, what is Jesus about? Jesus is about leadership, but specifically servant leadership, which is a concept that is a world apart from how the world actually works. We often experience leadership as authority, rank, comfort, and entitlement. In our world today, this is the reality. However, many of those in leadership roles abuse their power. Individuals who had to resign from their positions of power, like Senator Mendez from New Jersey, U.S. Representative Christopher Collins, and U.S. Representative George Santos, who have all been convicted of wrongdoing and were all elected politicians. This corruption is also a reality in religious establishments like the Diocese of Buffalo. Individuals like Anthony Franzone, who was convicted of embezzling money from the Catholic diocese, in addition to many of the clergy who were found guilty of abusing their power. Why do I share such a dismal picture? Many of us are aware of these individuals. We know that these leaders were educated with various degrees. Some were wealthy, some were affluent and lived well and were respected in the community. However, it is obvious that for all their privileged living and good upbringing, they lacked ethics. Through their lives, they somehow became self-centered, arrogant, trapped in their own egos, and abused the power that was entrusted to them. They are far from Jesus' teaching. Whoever wishes to be great among you will be your servant, the slave of all. In a society, leaders, political and religious, are very essential. Power is necessary. Power moves things and gets things accomplished. But we all have to remember the quote of Lord John Dalberg Acton: all power eventually corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is true unless it is grounded in the teachings of Jesus Christ. But leaders do not have to be in positions of authority. Each one of us are leaders in our own right. We are parents, grandparents, teachers, coaches, students, and we touch people's lives in many different ways. And because of this, we are leaders also. If we are to understand this gospel, each of us is called to be a leader. In Jesus' definition of leadership, one is called not to be served, but to serve and to give their lives is a ransom for many. This radical leadership, which I will refer to as servant leadership, is a deeply spiritual way to live by and a balance each of us must embrace to be a disciple of Jesus. The more responsibility and power I have, the more respect I must show and involve myself more deeply in service to others. It is like the quote from the Spider-Man movie, "With great power comes great responsibility." In order to practice servant leadership, we must keep in mind 4 concepts. The first concept is servant leaders must notice the marginal and less fortunate. We need to recognize in our daily lives all the different people we come into contact with, treating them with respect, and if nothing else, meeting them with a smile and extending a greeting of hello. The second concept is servant leaders must not think selfishly. They need to think communally, making decisions for the benefits of the whole community instead of being concerned only with profit margins, career advancements for themselves, or getting ahead. The impact of decisions need to be weighed, keeping in mind the long-range effects on the family, public health, and the community we live in at large. The third concept is servant leaders must be aware of their own personal egos and strive to be humble. They must be willing to ask the hard question, am I part of the problem? And have systems in place to allow others to voice concerns and have input. Without feedback, a leader can easily become a tyrant. The last concept in servant leaders must be accountable to the people they are leading. Without this accountability, a leader can be left with a self-serving viewpoint, their self-pride, and their ego. I believe that this gospel is telling all of us not to fall into the trap of our own ego and self-centeredness like St. James and St. John first did. We need to be servant leaders and follow the example of our greatest servant leader, Jesus Christ, when he did something totally unexpected. He showed us this example on Holy Thursday at the Last Supper when he did this. Jesus rose from supper, took off his outer garments. He took a towel and tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and dry them with a towel around his waist. Do you realize what I have done for you? You call me teacher and master, and rightly so, for indeed I am. If I therefore, the master and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. I have given you a model to follow, so that as I have done for you, you should also do. May God grant us the strength to be servant leaders, emulating the wonderful example he gave us in his Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.